Hey, Sister Squirrels! It's your favorite neurodivergent duo, Shy and Lex.
Welcome back to Black Girl, Brown Girl, Squirrel.
We want to take a moment to acknowledge there are a variety of people who could describe themselves as neurodivergent, and this can include a diverse list of conditions, disorders, etc.
And while our experiences may specifically relate to autism spectrum disorder, ASD, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, we hope that all our listeners can feel welcome and relate to the shared experience of being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world, because this is our safe space.
Alrighty then, we are back for another episode. So, we have talked about a lot of things, but one of the things I think everybody might be interested is, how we are dealing with our individual diagnoses now. I know we touched on it in some earlier episodes a little bit, but I'm really curious now that you have your diagnosis and things like that. How you doing, friend?
Oh man, it's funny. I think before I might have put this, I was like, oh yeah, I'm in a place of acceptance and got some clarity and I am cool with myself. And I think that's fairly true.
Mm.
But as I've mentioned before, with me not having a formal diagnosis, sometimes that is still something very difficult. Even with me kind of looking through more of the symptoms and everything for like research for the show, I was like, ooh, is that right? and and I'm like, to be very clear, I do not have a diagnosis.
Mm.
What I have is a pretty good inclination and some support from someone who is in the field in some way saying, yeah, that probably is the case. But if I was trying to fill out some ADA paperwork, I don't have no signature from my doctor, from anybody who is licensed and qualified to actually make the formal diagnosis. I don't have anything like that. And so a lot of times that kind of makes me still kind of like question myself, which is annoying considering I just been questioning myself my whole life. To still be questioning myself
Lord.
is just another phase of now I got this thing to think about.
So, help me to understand, why is it hard to accept, I guess is the
Mm,
word?
hmm To accept the label that I think is mine anyway.
Yeah.
It's funny you asked that. Therapist asked the same question. She was like, I'm so curious, why does it matter to you? I was like, I'm kind of, on the one hand, I want to get formally diagnosed. On the other hand, I'm a little bit afraid of it. She was
Mm.
like, why? I said, what if I'm wrong? Like, what if I go through all of this and then I am wrong? She was like, okay, but then she was like, well, first of all, I think it's highly unlikely that you're gonna go and not at least get a level 1 autism diagnosis, just to be frank. But why does it matter if I'm wrong? I'm like, well, then how am I going to explain in shorthand to others what is happening? She's
Mm.
like, what do you say now? I was like, a lot of times I just say I don't really get all social cues, and sometimes different environments are kind of hard for me to be in. She was like, so I mean, can you not just keep saying that? I was like, I mean, yeah, but I wasn't even really telling a lot of people
Mm.
because I was like, if I ever pursue formal diagnosis and then I'm not, I don't then have to backtrack to all these people
True.
and say, whoops, my bad, I was wrong. Also, perfectionism, I don't want to be wrong. That's not an option. Like, that's not being wrong is not what I want for myself. I don't wish that for me. I don't wish that for you. I don't wish being wrong on anybody. But that's obviously an impossibility
Right.
because perfectionism is seeking something that's impossible. I am not perfect. So the fact that I might be wrong sometimes is inevitable,
Mm.
doesn't make this any less difficult.
Wow. That is wow. I don't even have words for that, because it's not in I don't mean it in a bad way. It's just trying to understand, because most of the time when we say we don't want a diagnosis, it's more of a fear of what that diagnosis could mean. Like some people get scared to go and get their mammograms done because they're scared of what it might reveal that they may have cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and then they instantly jump to that. So I just find it interesting that something that you almost innately know now
Mm-hmm.
is also something that you still kind of fear. I find that
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah. And the fact that I mostly fear not having it, which is,
Yeah.
it feels almost backwards. Because I think a lot of times when people speak about having labels, specifically ones like these,
Mm-hmm.
and for their children and things like that, they're worried about a stigma.
Mm-hmm.
But in my perspective, I've already gone through childhood.
Mm.
And quite frankly, the stigma I had was being weird. I've already got it. So I don't care about that for me personally. um, if if this is the case, it's not like, well, now I have to live with it. No, I've been living with it and I still have to keep living with it. So a lot of that, I think, by already being an adult, some
Mm-hmm.
of that stuff I'm kind of already like, it's like a non-factor for me personally. But I don't know. I don't want to be a poser. Like I heard something recently, someone said there's a lot of stolen valor for autism. And I was like,
Wow.
ooh, that is, I think the prevalence of everything on the internet makes, and on the one hand, it's really good because more people have access to information they
Right.
need to have.
Right.
On the other hand, I think if we just start saying everybody got, then that takes away from the experiences of people who are actually like truly living with these traits and whatever challenges it presents, having your brain to work this way in a world that is not designed for people whose brains work this way.
Yeah. I think some of that is we want to feel validated, but we don't want to feel validated. Like, because you said something in the previous episode that was really interesting to me. It was like you talked about earning the
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
that's where it's like you want to be validated if you take the test to say that, yeah, I was right. But
Mhm.
then you don't want to be validated because it's almost like you feel like you didn't earn the right to be validated.
Mhm. Mhm. By just not going through any formalities of the
Yeah.
process, which are there for a reason. And I am a rule follower. I am a process designer and follower. Like that is, I'm like, these things are here for a reason.
Yes.
So it almost feels like I
It's
circumvented the
counterintuitive
process.
to who you are.
Mhm. Mhm.
That is
Mhm.
just, that's wild to me, you know. But you know what? I feel like that's part of maybe the challenge in stepping into this space is because for many of us, like for those of us that are late diagnosed, it's like to an extent, oh, it makes sense. And you look back on so many things. And then when you tell people, that you are neurodivergent, that you have ADHD and this and that, at least in my experience and in that of some of my friends, it was like, oh, well, we're all forgetful, or we all do this, or we all do that. It's like, it's
Mhm.
almost like people want to invalidate not just your feelings around it, but the diagnoses, your years of experience that you look back on and realize that you were dealing with it and where it popped up. And granted, when it comes to some situations, they don't manifest themselves until your 20s. But, there's statistics and things to prove that, especially for girls, it's overlooked. So it's been
Mhm.
there. It was there since we were children.
Mhm.
It's just that nobody really knew or paid attention because all the studies were for boys, little white boys, and
Mhm.
that was that. So yeah, I think it's one of those things where I guess it makes you question, do I need validation?
Mm.
You
And
know,
like, why do I need validation?
yeah, if I know that
Whose validation am I seeking?
I wanted answers, just like you were like, I
Mhm.
just want answers to know if this is this and that. But do I need to go and take a formal test in order to be, like, yes, this is your clinical diagnosis? I mean, I don't think I ever, when I was clinically diagnosed as depressed, I don't think I took a clinical test. I went in, talked to a therapist. He was like, yeah, you're gonna go on medical leave for a while because you're clinically depressed. And I was like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
you know. So it's just, I just think that's interesting, and I think that's maybe that's part of what's at play here too. Is like, do I really need that validation? You kind of want it for yourself to say that I diagnose myself. Does this make sense? But then on the other hand, is that going to make a difference with other people? Is it really
Mm,
all that important? You know?
and I think no, you're so right. Is it going to matter with other people? Because if you just tell somebody I have ADHD or I have autism, I don't think their first question is going to be, did you get formally
Right.
diagnosed?
Show me the
That's the
papers.
question that I will have as a person who maybe knows more about that process, so I can know more about, like, how did you get here? How
Mm-hmm.
long have you known? Was it a formal process? Was it kind of a self-discovery thing? But most people are not asking that question. So, do I want the papers for other people or do I want it for myself?
That's a good question, because I know I certainly don't have any papers that officially say that I am, ADHD. I was offered the opportunity to go in and get official testing, but like you said, when you have a behavior therapist and so forth that sits there and says, "Look, you're checking all the boxes, boo," so there's no need to do. I'm like, okay, well, you're telling me what I kind of figured and knew, so that's that part.
Hmm.
But I will say, like, we've talked about like what our initial reactions were to me to finding out. My question to you is how long do you think it took you to kind of really accept that this is who you are?
Ah, aside from the weird things we just discussed that are probably preventing me from fully accepting it, I think in my mind, I accepted it before I even talked to a therapist about it.
Mm,
I think I was already kind of like, I think this is what's happening.
mm-hmm,
Like, I'm pretty sure this is what's happening. I don't really think it was a long process for me.
mm,
Like, we're talking about it. The next time I come for a session, she had some papers printed out for me about the reasons why it is harder to diagnose in women based on the diagnostic criteria that exists, some of the ways it might look different in women, and then another step forward with minorities.
mm-hmm,
Then she suggested to me the book I read, Unmasking Autism by Dr. Devin Price, I believe their name is. Listening to that audiobook and being like, well,
mm.
this is it. Like, I was like, I've never, for the most part, I don't read and study more information about it and feel like I'm off track. It usually feels more and more relevant to my life.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
I, it's like that. And I think, if anything, what it's done is helped me to kind of more so accept who I am as a person. Like, oh, if that is what my brain is doing, some of the stuff that I think is wrong with me, it's not that it's wrong with me, it's just like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And this is what it's going to be. So, how can you just roll with that?
Yeah. I think for me, it didn't take a long time to accept. It was more of the emotional toll of realizations that came back over years of thinking about different situations at school, at home, relationships, decisions I've made as an adult, different things like that. That washed over me like fiercely and just made me very emotional in a lot of different ways. But I think I accepted it kind of relatively quickly. And it was interesting to me because once I had an understanding for how I function and how I think, then I felt the need to make sure that everybody knew. So if there was it was
Hmm.
almost like I use it almost like as an excuse, like, okay, well, if this happens, it's because of this. And so then I had to go, no, everything isn't because of your ADHD,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Because you're
Hmm.
neurodivergent. Some of it is you're just straight up lazy. you just you know
No,
you just didn't
facts.
want to do XYZ today. So just be honest, that had nothing to do with your ADHD. Um at other times it was they're just being annoying and I'm just wanting to ignore them. So I'm not hyper focused. I am just ignoring them. It's just it coming to some of those realizations. So I just got to keep it real. But then
Hmm.
it got to the point where I really started, the more like you, the more I read about symptoms, particularly in women, how we function, that sort of a thing, the more it started to be like, okay, this is definitely you. The more I became aware of my behavior, how I spoke, how I was interacting with people.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, okay, sometimes it was, what adjustments can you make? Because you can't expect everybody to understand you. And on the other
Mm.
hand, what can I do to educate other people so that they can adjust to me? And then so that's when I kind of got on that side of things, of feeling like, no, I'm not going to keep trying to adjust to everybody else. It's time folks start learning how to adjust to me. And so I centered myself into my own conversation rather than centering other people into my story. That makes sense.
Mm. Yeah. So then I guess you might have answered this a little bit already, but kind of same question you asked me. When did you start feeling like, okay, yeah, this is me. This is part of who I am.
Probably almost immediately within a few days. Because once
Okay.
I started looking things up, I had already looked up a little bit about ADHD in particular, not realizing that I knew there was a spectrum to neurodivergence, but not realizing how much it covered, right? So then I'm
Mm-hmm.
diving into it and I'm starting to read more about autism spectrum disorder. I'm starting to read more because mine was, like I said, was the ADHD. And then I think I came back for a session like a few weeks later, and then she was like, now let's talk about your PDA. And I was like, my what? And she's like, yeah, your pathological demand avoidance. And I was like, what does that mean? As soon as she said, it's basically, I avoid doing the things that I am told to do. You have a problem with authority. I was like, yep, well, that's me. you know? So I didn't try to run and hide from anything. I thought about all the times that, like when growing up, my mom was like, hey, you need to call your dad and talk to your dad. And I'd be like, okay. And then
Mm.
I wouldn't call. And it wasn't that I didn't want to call. I don't want you to tell me when I need to call. I will call when I will call. So she'd be like, did you call today? Nope. Are you going to call today? I don't know. I would do things when I wanted to do them, unless it was something that was going to get my butt whooped like ASAP. So, so when I thought about ADHD, I thought about, like I said, how often I would have to take like copious notes on things. And then sometimes I would get so lost in the notes that I would miss other things. I've thought about how I would stay up, 36 and 48 hours completing a work project, just being hyper focused on it to get it done. How often I procrastinate, even when I try not to. How there's parts of my life that's very organized and parts of my life that are like completely chaotic. Things like
Mm.
that. And I was like, yeah, that's very much me. So it didn't take long for me to acknowledge that, yes, this was legit me and who I am. It took me longer to not use it as a crutch or an excuse for things. Same thing when with my autoimmune illnesses and all that kind of stuff. When you're tired, it's like, oh, it's easy for me to blame my fibro or my rheumatoid or whatever. No, no, no. Sometimes you just tired because your butt stayed up all night and you should have just went to bed. You're tired because you didn't eat right, or something like that,
Mm.
versus you're having a flare at the moment or the weather outside is messing with your body, So yeah, that's what I had to go through and make those adjustments for. And I still make sure that I analyze everything that I'm doing to make sure that I'm not like, is this really my neurodivergence or is this just something else? So I still struggle with that sometimes, but yeah.
Mm. It's interesting you say that because I think part of this process of accepting that then also goes into just like plain old personality.
Mm,
Because I immediately was like, well, I cannot say that everything is because of autism, because that cannot be the case. Because it's already the fact that like everybody's going to present it differently. So
right.
I said, there's probably some stuff I got going on that's just because like I don't want to people today because I don't like people like that. But not, I think there are some autistic people who like people more than I like people. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like
I can
it's a
understand.
so things like that. And the aspect of the PDA has always been so interesting to me from the moment I heard about it from you because You're like, I don't want you telling me what to do. And I don't want to do it for the very fact that you told me to do it. And I feel like I live my life trying to make sure I do everything so that no one even has to tell me to do anything.
I wish I did.
I feel like the idea of responsibility is such a big thing for me
Mm,
that also leads into the perfectionism and all of that.
mm-hmm.
That, like, the idea of not doing something someone told me to do does not even compute. Like, if this person rightfully has authority to tell me to do something, I should do it. Being like, "Ugh, I don't want to because they told me," it's like not a thing that immediately comes to mind
And
for
see,
me.
it's not so much of I don't want to do it because they told me. It's I don't want to do it because I don't want to do it when you told me to do it. Like call your dad
It's
today. Why I gotta call him today? Why can't I call him tomorrow?
and I'm just like, but why you can't just call them today? You see what I'm saying? Like, it's just I can't even
Because
I
I
can't
don't
even
feel
fathom
like yeah.
I can't even fathom the whole thing because it almost feels to me like self defeating. Like, because you've done this, it's like a weird, it's like procrastination with evil. Like, it's like, why wouldn't you just do the thing today so that we ain't got to talk about it no more?
You know what? That we I think we may have coined a new term, petty procrastination. I don't know. Yeah, and you know what? And here's the crazy part. Like I'm sitting here and honestly, I'm trying not to get emotional about it. It's like
hmm
it doesn't make sense to me. Everything you said
mm-hmm.
makes sense to me, but my reactions doesn't make sense to me. I mean, there are times where I'm like legit, like, no, I just can't today because I've got this, I've got that, I'm doing da da da. That feels like an
hmm
okay justification, right?
hmm
Then why don't you do it tomorrow? Because I don't feel like doing it. Well, why don't you feel like doing it? I don't know. I just don't. Like growing up and stuff, I guess I've always been the type is I didn't like not being able to label my emotions. Like, why am I feeling this way right now? And that goes to the fact that, and this is true for a lot of us that are diagnosed with neurodivergence. Some of us are dealing with trauma. So,
hmm
and sometimes that's what triggers our acknowledgement that we may have neurodivergence. I haven't done a lot of research on the connections to all of that, and so that'll be forthcoming. But yeah, I just felt like because there were times that I would be very emotional about things and not even understand why. And it wasn't until years later that I would understand why, right? So now when I'm looking at, I have ADHD, I have PDA, why do I feel like I just don't want to do it? And when you don't know that, especially at this age, for me to still up and say, I don't know, that's a hard pill to swallow. Why don't you know? Because we're told by this point, you should know better. You're an adult, you're this
mm
and you're that, right? And
hmm
I'm like, I still don't know why I feel this way. I still don't know why I don't want to do. I just know I don't want to do it. And I'm not trying to be rude or defiant. I'm not in the sense of, trying to be a smart aleck or, I'm grown. I ain't got to do what you told me. It's nothing like that. It's a literal, in my mind, in my being, is like, I just don't want to do it. And I don't know why. I just don't. There's times my husband, even to this day, and I know I'm picking on my dad and I love him to pieces and it's not to pick on him, but it was the easiest analogy that I can think of besides the many complicated things that come. But like even now, my husband will sometimes say, hey, when was the last time you talked to your dad? I don't know. Because this is the kind of relationship my dad and I had, kind of growing up. I
hmm
mean, we're much better now, but I was like, I don't know. Well, I'm going to call him. Okay, you can call him. Well, don't you want to be on the phone? No, you can call him and I'll talk to him when I talk to him. So it finally got to a point where he will pick up the phone and he'll just call him when he calls him. But I know that my dad's going to be like, where's my baby girl? And I'll be like, okay, I'm here. And I'll say a quick hello or whatever. But he knows that the conversation is primarily between him and my husband versus between me and him. I hate not being able to put a label on certain emotions that I have. And that's one of the downsides to PDA is you just simply just like, I don't want to, and I don't know why I don't want to. And unfortunately, that appeals to my rebellious side. And so I have to be very careful with that because, when certain things come up and I feel a certain type of way about it, and, I very much rely on my faith, as you know. So
Hmm.
there's times when I'm like, I really got to reach back and rely on that, because if I don't, this is going to push me one step closer to doing something that I would be very uncomfortable later on to have been involved in, or to have done something a certain way.
Yeah. It's like you don't want this sort of pathological thing that's going on to push you in a direction that you don't actually want to be in. It's almost like you don't want to be doing something for the sake of doing something. Is that you don't want like this pathological kind of thought process is happening to push you into doing something that you don't even actually want to do. Like because it's against maybe every like ethical, moral thing that
Yes,
you've got that you actually believe. You don't
yes,
want it to like take you away from that. You don't be doing something just to be doing something. Like,
exactly. Exactly. I mean, even if I do feel passionate about something, again, there are certain things that I hold near and dear to my heart that has made me the person that I am, that makes up my belief systems and things like that. So, no, I don't want to have that I'm going to fight against this, or I'm going to speak up against that. And no, that's not, I don't want that to be used in an improper way. So
mm,
that's the other reason why I have to be careful, because it's easy, like, when sometimes if a client demands that they want something by a certain date, you don't know what I have going on. I tell you when I'm going to, mm-mm, mm-mm. Or when I was an employee, when I was working, it was the same thing, that they would push a deadline date and you'd be like, I got 5,679 things on my plate, but you want this. So that's what I mean by, there were times where I really had to swallow that down and go, don't give into that, because that's not going to lead to anywhere positive. It's
mm-hmm.
not going to lead to
Yeah.
anywhere positive. We were talking about how we're dealing with all of this, and some of the things we realize when we say, okay, I realize I'm neurodivergent, I don't want to use my neurodivergence as an excuse for not doing better things, or for not being the best person that I can be, just because there are
Mm-hmm.
certain things I am prone to do because of how my brain thinks and how it functions. I still don't want that from keeping me from being the best person that I can be. As an employee, when you have PDA, and your boss is telling you when something is due, and you're like, I got all this work on my plate. How are you going to tell me when this is due? Let me tell you what I have available. And you can't do that. You can't keep pushing stuff off. Sometimes they want to demand certain things of you, and you're just like, in your head, no, I don't want to. I don't want to. Would you like to work with Tim on the No. Tim's breath always stank and he don't know what he talked about. No. you know and so it's a weird thing, but I think it comes more into play sometimes when it's your personal relationships than it is anything else. That's
Mm,
when I think sometimes our thinking processes and the way we interact really comes into play.
yeah. Yeah.
At work, like you said, there's the authority situation. Now, don't get me wrong, I was always taught I ain't nothing but another man or woman, but you do have a certain level of, but this is my job and I'm here to get a check.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to act with a certain decorum in that sense. But yeah, I think it shows up more in the personal interactions, friends, family, than almost anywhere else, quite honestly.
I
Yeah.
could see that maybe being something that could be a source of friction in personal relationships.
I think it can be, because especially when you're talking about dealing with other people, right? And timelines, right? So there are people I have in my life that are very much time oriented. Like, if you are on time, you're already late, right? That kind of a thing. And for me, I try my hardest to be on time. If I have an appointment, like, I have Zoom calls. My Zoom call is at such and such a time. And especially if I'm responsible, I'm trying to get there a couple of minutes early. I may not show up till that same exact time. I have to set timers and reminders for myself, like all the time. I have multiple reminders on my calendar, multiple reminders on my phone, like alarm sets. Anytime I'm doing something, I do the Pareto method where it's 30 minutes or whatever, because part of me will want to avoid doing something because they wanted me to do it at such and such a time. My husband's a very much process oriented person, very much a thinker. Personally, I think he's undiagnosed ADHD, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But he's the type of person that says, he was like, babe, can we talk about X, Y, and Z? Sure. I'm ready to talk about it right then. He's like, okay, well, I'll come back at like 7:00 to talk to you. And I'm like, why you got to put a time on it? Instantly, my PDA kicks in. Why you got to put a time on it? Why can't you just come talk to me? Why can't you just, and he's like, well, because there's other things that I want to do. So I'm just letting you know that I'll come up around that time. But why you got to tell me and then I start giving this pushback because I don't want you to put demands on my time. That's how my brain hears it, sees it, processes it. You're putting demands on my time. So if you want to talk about it, let's talk about it now. Or let me tell you when I want to talk about it.
Listen, this deep. I got nothing for this, friend. I got nothing. I wouldn't even know where to begin.
Because
if I was having a conversation with somebody and that's the responses I was getting, I'd be like, what is happening with you right now? Because this don't seem like this is even about me. And I don't know why you're being this way to me for a you problem. That would be my reaction to it.
And I get that. I get
Yeah.
that. And being somebody that works with other people on communication skills, that is not how you communicate with somebody. So it took effort on my part, one, to explain to him what happens in my mind when I hear that. It really does happen. You're putting demands on my time. And that's not what the intent is. It took effort on my part to go, what he's trying to do is give you a heads up so you can prepare yourself. Or if there's other things that you want to do, or, he knows that sometimes I can get into something heads down, everything else is tuned out. So it's his way of saying, at this time, can you just make us some slice of time for me to be able to talk about X, Y, and Z? So I had to make the adjustments once I knew why I felt that way. And I feel it would be so strong in me. It's wild. And it feels, and I know it sounds probably absolutely bonkers, and it feels that way. But it was something that I struggled with for a very long time. Now I understand why. So we communicate differently now. And he's like, okay, babe, I want to talk to you about this, or can you help me with this a little bit later on? Okay, sure. Now I go, how much later on? Like, you talking an hour, a couple of hours? Is it something we can do real quick right now? Sometimes he's able to do it. Sometimes he's like, no, I need to do some more, because usually about schoolwork or something. He's like, I need to do a little bit more diving into this. And then, so then the way that we communicate about it is different, and we come to a conclusion, and it just makes it easier. And then I had to learn, just in general, definitely to communicate more effectively, especially given that my brain can go off here, there, everywhere. You're not on that path with me. So I can't speak in half sentences. I can't just shout out a thought. I also do not try to push back. So, if he says now, like he tends to use the phrase, and this is something else that used to get to me. He would say, like, when it was something with his schoolwork, he goes, I need your help. You would like to ask for my help. I would say that all the time because it brought up the PDA hairs of, what do you mean you need me to do something? You don't need me to do nothing, because I don't have to do, I'm looking at your face right now like, whoa. But I'm just saying, but that's how for real it is. It was just like, it was the wildest thing. And I was like, why do you keep saying, you ask me? I felt like, ask me. So now that he understands, and I better understand, we have changed our terminology with each other. It still means the same thing. He still wants my help, but now he says it in a way that doesn't trigger that particular response in my brain. I don't have a ton of control over that response in my brain. And I think that's one of the hard things. We're talking about self-acceptance and everything. That's one of the things I think is hard when you start looking at what makes up your thought and action patterns when you find out you're neurodiverse and where you are in this whole neurodiverse world, whatever I call it, the spectrum, because whatever ends you're on and where you're at, when you start thinking about all the things that kind of go into this and that, you sit back and you go, wow, I need to learn how to communicate differently. I need to learn how to interact differently. And it's not to kowtow to a neurotypical world. It's because when you're in a relationship, whether you're talking friendships, mothers, daughters, fathers, whatever, siblings, you do what you got to do to make things work and to be at peace. So when you're talking in a marriage where it's already compromising and all these other types of things and things that honestly you don't mind doing because you do love this person, you're spending your life with this person, when something kicks in that starts putting up those barriers, you got to break them down, because that will start creating a chasm that you will not be able to fix and cross so easily. So yeah, we had to figure out how to adjust our communication style, because honestly, I will put it like this: it got worse the worse my mental health was. So when my mental health wasn't in control, that PDA was like, whoo, strong. So once I got that back under control, and I'm like, watch how you're talking. Think about what he's really trying to say. He's not trying to demand anything of you. He's asking something of you, but this is how he knows how to ask. So I had to share words with him. This is what will make me more comfortable if you ask me this way. And then I had to find words to make it more comfortable for him if I say, I can't do this right now, or I could do it later, or yes. And to accept the fact that his brain works with, I need to put a time on it. So I'm working towards that time.
So it's, in a way, you had to reframe these demands as requests, because ultimately these things are always still optional. There
Yes.
is still always an option to
Yes.
say no,
Yes.
or not right now, or not at that time, not at
Yes.
this. But I think it sounds like, to me, listening to it, it's like the immediate reaction was always, this is purely a demand.
Yep.
And I don't want to be demanded anything.
Yep.
And to be able to reframe those as requests, and then working with your loved ones to help see things as requests and them to frame it as requests
Yes.
is helpful. It's interesting. It seems like a lot of the acceptance for us in this process kind of is a lot of reframing.
Mm-hmm.
Reframing how you see the way you interact with the world and the way the world interacts with you.
Mm-hmm.
And having the label or the information, whatever it is, helps you to do that in a healthy way.
Yeah, because I think, and I think you kind of really talked about it and encapsulated it well over, some of the episodes where you talked about growing up, you had the label of being weird and you accepted that. You felt like you were an outcast, you accepted that. Different things like that, and it took time for you to accept that. However you chose to accept
Mm-hmm.
it or adjust it in your brain to go, okay, this is a title that I'm going to take on, a mantle I'm going to wear. I think we tend to build up defenses around those things. And I was always called sensitive as a child. Well, I was sensitive, but I built up defenses around being called sensitive, because it used to hurt my feelings literally to be called sensitive. And
Mm.
I knew I was sensitive. I don't need you to tell me I'm sensitive. I know I'm sensitive, and I'm about to cry right now. So don't tell me I'm sensitive, kind of thing. And I built up defenses around that. But that was just who I was as a person, not realizing that there might be other things associated or tied to that. Like there could have been, because of trauma or whatever else could have been tied to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as we're growing up and we're learning different things, we compartmentalize and label things ourselves, and some things that aren't negative, we make it a negative.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we have to now reframe it. Being gifted and being so smart, yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
seems great, and our teachers love that, but we also know we get bullied for that as well by other students, or you get put on a pedestal by other people, or other people only want to talk to you and be your friend because they want you to do their homework or do whatever,
Yep. They
things
want you
like
to
that,
do their homework.
right? So there's a lot of things that go with that. So So even though we might have felt good about, I was like, you knew math, right? And you were super
Mm-hmm.
smart at math. I would have loved to have been your friend because we could have helped each other out. I've been like, girl, let me help you with something else because math is just not my forte. But we end up sometimes attaching negative thoughts and feelings to those things because of how we had to interact with the world that didn't understand us. And now that we better understand ourselves, we have to now put down some of those defenses we've built up to protect ourselves and our feelings around being different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it ends up really affecting the way you view yourself, and then you do some reflecting back, and then you start being like, oh, so that's why I felt this way about myself all this time.
Mm-hmm.
And then seeing what things become important to you, especially as you become an adult, you're like, why do I care so much about that? It's like,
Yep.
well, because I had these challenges and I had to build up a defense in this way against those challenges. This
Mm-hmm.
is what I came up with. This is the coping strategy I came up with.
Exactly.
And this is what I still got.
Yep.
So
And
then understanding that that's where you're at is also a thing, because you're like, oh man, now I got to unpack that.
right. I realized, I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was a coping strategy. Is that how I was getting through it? It's there's a lot. So I don't want anybody out there who is just now coming into this space, who's trying to figure out where they are, who they are, all that kind of stuff. I don't want you to feel like some weird anomaly. All of your feelings are valid. Everything you're trying to work through is valid. That's part of going through the process of learning how to accept ourselves. That's another reason why, and you'll hear me and Lex say it all the time, that getting therapy is so important, because there is a lot to unpack. There's a lot of
Hmm.
feelings that go along with getting a diagnosis or getting a confirmation or validation of what you've been thinking and feeling in your mind. I hear people, grown women all the time, saying, hey, I'm undiagnosed, and they're undiagnosed, kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, because they're scared of what that diagnosis means and symbolizes now,
Hmm.
and what that new label that they're going to carry. And yes, we define ourselves for ourselves, but it is scary to have a new label. And the thought, like one of my clients was saying, well, what other people, I think about what other people might be thinking about me. And that also scares people from going and getting officially diagnosed or
Mm.
proudly wearing a label, so to speak, because they're scared of what other people are going to think. So speaking of which, when you started telling people, what was it like with the reactions, like from those that were closest to you, like your parents, your closest friends or siblings and family members? Like, what was that reaction like, and how did that make you feel?
So, as I mentioned in a previous episode, with my parents, that's a little complicated. First, I told them I thought. They were like, ha ha, and started cracking so many jokes. We almost got off topic. I was like, y'all, I'm talking about this because I'm serious. I was crying. It was so dramatic. It was a lot going on in that conversation. And then after the conversation in therapy, and I called my mom to tell her, she was just like listening and kind of quiet and just like, well, listen, you said this is information that you wanted to know. You were thinking this, and now you've gotten some answers on it. And that can help you in your whole journey in therapy. That's how she saw it.
Mm,
And that is the last time we talked about it.
wow.
I have not told a single other family member. It has not come up. I doubt it will unless they somehow find this. Like when I send it to mom to be like, Ma, guess what? I'm on a whole podcast. And then, but my family is so private that private
Mm,
in the sense of I can't see my mother then sending this to everybody in the family. I think
got
she would
it.
just hear it and be like, oh, okay. And that would be it. That would
Got
be it. She might tell my dad, your daughter got a podcast. He'll be like, what? That'll probably be exactly what he says, how he says it, what? And, and like, I just don't see it going further than that in all honesty. When it came to friends, I was keeping it close to the chest because of, again, me being like, I don't have any formal information. So, eh. I don't want to just be out here telling folks this is what I got going on if
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually. And then I decided to broadcast on the podcast. So that's smart. That's consistent. That makes a lot of sense. So think about when I told like one of my closer best friends, like my roommate Jazz,
Mm-hmm.
part of our whole little friend group. She already kind of knew like the whole process, and me telling that I thought this might be the case anyway. Us watching Love on the Spectrum and her looking at me like, "Ooh, friend," and I'm like, "I know it's crazy, right? You think that sounds crazy what they said? I understand exactly why they said that. I understand exactly how they had their thought process. I just have figured out you can't say that to people, but I want to say that to people. So for her, it was kind of just like, oh, all right, cool. Like when I first mentioned that I think I might be on the autism spectrum, she was kind of like, oh, that actually might make sense.
Yep. I
But
can see Jazzy saying that.
yes, but also you got to think she's a pediatric nurse.
Yes.
So she's had a lot of experiences with kids who are on the spectrum. She knows what this looks like, right?
Yes.
This
Yes.
isn't a new concept for her. What I maybe would tell other friends, maybe friends I'm not that close to, but like pretty close acquaintances,
Mm-hmm.
the number of times that the reaction I get is, "Oh, really?" I remember I said to one friend, I was like, "Yeah, I would probably be what we would refer to as like high functioning." She was like, "Yeah, very high functioning, like very, very high functioning." And I was like, "I don't know how I feel about that." I don't know if I love that
Mm.
kind of thing. And then it's kind of like, what's your mama say? As if I need to go ask my mama if I got it. Like I need my mama to tell me that this is true. My mother is a lot of things. She's a wonderful lady. She is not a therapist. She is not a clinician.
Yeah.
She does not have a PhD in psychology. She's not a registered licensed clinical psychologist. Like this is not a thing that my mother is able to assist with, despite the many things that she can help with. So
Yeah.
I felt very weird by that reaction because I was like, so what I had to say didn't mean nothing. Like I'm just saying stuff. Okay, okay. A lot of like, I never would have guessed. I didn't think that, and I'm like, I think the problem is going back to everything is presented a certain way in media, so people's idea of it
Yes.
is totally different than how it might actually look in
Mm-hmm.
everyday life with a variety of people.
Right.
But that doesn't help with me kind of grappling with it myself. If the whole problem I have is I basically have autism imposter syndrome, I don't think people constantly telling me, no, I don't think you got autism is helpful. Like I think it only makes it more confusing, and then it makes me be like, whatever, I ain't gotta tell nobody.
Understood. Now we got even more new terms. So we got
Mm.
petty procrastination and autism imposter syndrome. Okay.
Mhm.
No, but you know what? What you said was so interesting to me because I know that the day that I was told that I had ADHD, I was like, wow. And I can't remember if I said something that day or if it was the next day that I told my mom and my husband, we all lived together, and I told them,
Mhm.
and it was like, okay. And I can see the wheels turning like, okay, so what exactly does that mean?
Mm.
And I was like, well, I found a video that I think will work and explain it a little bit. So I showed them on YouTube. A lady by the name of Mel Robbins has a video that talks about women and neurodivergence. She also was a late diagnosed woman that received the diagnosis. And so we were watching it, and then partway through watching, because it's like almost an hour and some odd minutes, my family was like, okay, can you pause it here so that we can talk about this and this. So we did. We talked about it in depth. We watched all parts of the video. And frankly, after that, I would try to have other conversations about it, like with my mom. And like you said, she's wonderful and she's this and she's that. But it was almost like she didn't really want to dive into it too much.
Mhm.
I do remember that she initially asked me questions like, well, do you recall any instances, like you asked me one time, do you recall instances growing up where it may have come into play and this and that? And I recalled that whole ninth grade algebra situation.
Mm.
And she in my eyes, kind of went on the defensive a little bit. Well, we did the best that we could, what we had and what we knowledge. I'm like, I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying I stated facts of this is how the situation went down. And now that I know what could have been a part of this, we could have handled it differently, but we couldn't handle it back then because we didn't know. And they weren't exactly checking girls, for being neurodivergent. So what, yeah, I get we go off of what we know. And I was like, I'm not blaming you. And I think that's probably, when I heard you talk about like your parents before and things like that. And I'm wondering if that's kind of at the heart of some of their reactions. Like my dad had a completely different reaction. My dad was like, well, good. I'm glad you found out. And this is that. And he goes, I was told, he was told that did he have some neurodivergence? Because it is considered hereditary. I can't remember, but I
I
want
mean,
to
you
say,
told me what he got. I don't know. You want me to say that on here? You want to edit it out? You said that he has narcissistic personality
yeah,
disorder.
that's what I was trying to avoid to say.
That's a whole other thing in
That's what I
itself.
was trying to avoid saying on the air. But since we put it out there,
You don't have to keep that in at all.
no, but it's all good. But that he did say that about himself, and I want to say that he did say that he had some ADHD, but his reaction was a little bit different. It was like, okay, now granted, he didn't go into all the details and all that kind of thing, but it was like, okay, so how are you handling now? Are you okay? Or is it good? He was checking for me now and where I am now. Whereas I felt like my mom's take was, okay, now what am I being blamed for that happened in your past? And I'm like, that's not the case, not the situation. And I felt like my husband was more of the trying to understand, okay, so what does this mean for us going forward? How do we work through this and this and that? So we've had other discussions about it, and I've been honest with him about different things and stuff like that. And that's just helped our communication get better because we've always been good communicators. But, there's times when even no matter how good your marriage is, there's going to be times when you guys just aren't on the same page. And so you have to sit down and kind of, what do we got to do to get back on the same page? And so we had to go through a phase of that, like I said, with the whole PDA thing coming up. And that also too, because I didn't have my emotional regulation was really out of the window to an extent. You're combining an adjustment in your hormones because of, having a hysterectomy and then also to having you're in menopause and all that kind of stuff. So your hormones are out of whack. And then on top of that, now you got this other going on. So yeah, we had to have a whole conversation like, okay, let's come back together and sit down and figure out how we're going to move from here. And so I was glad that we were able to do that. And we have the kind of relationship where we could do that. But I still think that there is hesitancy to an extent. And I also think too, there's a desire to empathize, but not knowing how to empathize. So when I say things like, I can't remember anything today. I can't remember where my keys are. I can't remember where my phone is. I walked out the house and I meant to grab da-da-da-da-da. I ignore my timer since I forgot to eat, and it's like, oh, that happens too. That what happens when you get older and da-da-da-da. There's trying to empathize, but not realizing this is different. This goes to a whole other level. In fact, I was reading something. I can't remember if it was one of the articles that you had sent me to take a look at when, as part of some of our research for the show. But it was talking about, and if you hear me clicking, I'm clicking through some of the screens that I have here, but it was talking about the question of, but do you do this all the time? Like how often are you doing certain things? And I thought that was powerful. And like, not only just how often, but to what degree are you doing these things? So it was like, oh, here it is. How often do you have trouble wrapping up the final details of a project once the challenging parts have been done? How often do you have difficulty getting things in order when you have to do a task that requires organization? This is talking about like ADHD symptoms. How often do you have problems remembering appointments or obligations? Most people might forget one or two things. They're not going to forget all the things.
All the time.
All the time, like literally every day. So if it is not in my calendar, And if I don't have an alarm set, and my calendar, I have multiple reminders. So like even when I have appointments, I have a reminder that'll go off at least an hour before my appointment and then 30 minutes before, so I can snooze it multiple times to keep my attention that I need to join within the next 30 minutes. Most people don't need or have to do that. They'll look and go, oh, okay, well, I'll jump on, or they show up 15 minutes early and they're sitting there waiting or whatever the case may be. So I think that there is a need sometimes with those that we care about, our friends and our family, to try to empathize. I think there's a need for them to, like, when you talk about the friends, like I've known you for years, never would have had you on the spectrum. Never. I just thought that you were funny. I thought that you were this and that. And I did. I never thought you were weird or anything like that. I just thought you were funny. And then when you go, no, I'm being really serious about this. And I'm like, oh, okay. But it was still funny, Guys, you got to understand I still laugh at Lex, and Lex will still look at me like kind of sideways, like halfway smiling, and look at me and just be like, no, I was dead serious. It's a certain look she gives me that lets me know, oh, she was really being serious about that. And so that
And I don't know why we're laughing,
yes,
quite frankly.
I don't know why you're laughing at me and what I said when I said what I said and I meant what I said. And I'm like, okay. But I just say that to say, like, I didn't. And then it wasn't until I came to you and Jazz and started talking about what I was thinking and feeling in my conversation I had with our mutual friend Hannah, that both of you started expressing, Jazz was like, girl, you definitely got ADHD. And then you was like, well, you might want to talk to the therapist about this. It's always how you say it. You always like, friend, you might want to give consideration to.
If I hit you with that now, friend, that means I got something to say.
Yes. That means you better listen. But, so I think sometimes with our friends, it's a need to connect and to show that they didn't feel you were different, that they didn't notice a difference. And then with some of them that might have thought that was a little odd what was said, and they go, oh, that's why I go, oh yeah, you're very high functioning, because I would have never have thought. And again, it is a lot of the portrayals. It's just like when people think people are handicapped, I hate that term, but that they're, that they might have accessible needs, then they go, well, it's only people that you see in a wheelchair, or it's only people you see that might be blind with a walking stick, or people that you see doing sign language. As somebody who writes training all the time, when I have to write training on accessibility and I go to find images, just the general, I was going to say spectrum, but the general selections that are out there, no pun intended on the spectrum part, but just with the general selections that are out there, if I type in accessibility or handicap, I guarantee you I'm going to get a photo of somebody in a wheelchair, somebody with a walking stick or service animal, someone doing sign language, and someone that looks like they have Down syndrome. And it's never taken into consideration that there could be somebody sitting there looking like you and I that do not have all those things, that could also have a traumatic brain injury, that could have invisible illnesses, PTSD, a bipolar, all of those different types of things, which are also considered in the category of accessible needs. So I say that to say that they want to try to make you feel normal, when I never said that my ADHD and neurodivergence didn't make me feel normal. What other people call normal.
I'll argue that I ain't never felt normal, so that's a whole thing in itself. But I think you did just make me kind of reframe how I saw those conversations a little bit by viewing it as them maybe attempting to empathize, because the way that they went about it is just simply not a way that I would do it.
Gotcha.
I guess I think a little bit of it is like assuming that if someone's telling you something about themselves, that they want a particular kind of feeling or reaction. And to me, that's like trying to assume what I'm feeling.
Gotcha.
Or assume what I need. And because I can't do that with people, like I do not know what you're feeling. I don't know. So I'm always going to just simply ask.
Got it.
So if someone tells me something about themselves that I never had considered, I'll go, oh, so what are your thoughts on that?
Yes,
Like,
you do.
I'm going to ask you. I don't know. And I kind of do that with everything. It could be regular life stuff. And I'm like, I don't know what your reaction to this is. So let me find out so I know what page I need to be on with you.
No,
So,
but I appreciate that about you because I feel like that's a genuine interest that
mm,
a lot of people don't display. They'll just let it slide. They won't say anything. You know, like if we're
mm,
sitting eating something and you're like, okay, so what are your thoughts on X, Y? You know, you will ask that when anytime that I've come to you and I expressed how I felt about it. That's why I said you have found ways to comfort me in ways that I didn't know I needed to be comforted. So there's
mm,
times where I've come and I've talked and I've said things and you will ask questions and I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Or, oh, I'm so happy somebody finally asked me that. And then I feel
mm.
like I can express myself and say something. And you have a genuine, and then don't get me wrong, you still gonna be Lex and you still gonna give it to me straight. You know, if there's something that I need to hear or know, but I trust that that's a safe place for me, and I trust that about you. But
Mm,
I think we're both onto something that people are trying to empathize with us, and also too, they don't know our feelings behind it. So I think in their way of trying to show empathy, they're trying to make it feel like, well, I don't feel that you're different. Really? That's how? Okay. Well, great. So, and then I'm finding with other people, they're like, whoa, okay, because you know we like to collect our own kind. So they're like, oh my goodness, I am too. Okay, I'm undiagnosed or I have and you know, and you realize how many are actually in your circle. So for those of you that are new
Mhm,
to this world, trust me, you have a lot more people in your world than you think. We are magnets. We draw to each other, but that's where we also get our support systems and we can talk about all the different ways that we show up in this world because all of us do show up. We may have some similar things, but we're all going to show up differently and it impacts us differently
mm.
for sure.
So if someone is trying to kind of come to grips with where they are in this whole process, this whole self-discovery, diagnosis, no diagnosis, whatever it may be, identifying yourself as somebody whose brain is experiencing some real neurodivergence, what would you say to them is helpful for this process?
Mm, wow. First of all, take some time to sit with it yourself.
Hmm.
And the reason for that is because just like with any other diagnosis, you can't always explain something you yourself don't understand and that you haven't wrapped your feelings around as of yet. I have unfortunately been in several situations where I've had to deal with potential life or death diagnoses. And
Mm-hmm.
so, based on that, I have just learned to sit with it and start trying to wrap your thoughts around it. And if you need help, go to a very trusted person that you know is not going to judge you or, for lack of a better term, overly empathize with you. They're going to sit, they're going to listen, and they're going to help you with that logical, okay, so what are the next steps? So I would say sit with it, start getting educated, because the more you know, I feel like the more comfortable you can become. It didn't take long for me to start being comfortable in my skin. It's taken longer to deal with the emotions that I have personally felt around different things associated with my neurodivergence. What I mean by that is I wear my neurodivergence proud. I added it to my LinkedIn, my Instagram, my threads, you know, for my business and everything else. I'm proud. It's nothing to be ashamed of. For me, it's nothing to hide. And it was like, this makes so much sense. And why would I not want people to know? The hard part for me ended up being accepting that I did certain things in my life.
Mm,
And it was because of how I think.
mm,
And because I
mm-hmm,
had no control over certain things, I didn't have the tools to properly manage those things like my impulsivity and things like that. And I'm also grateful that that did not lead me down a path that could have been much, much more dangerous for me in that sense,
mm,
because you coupled some of that with trauma would
mm-hmm,
have not been a good combination. Not a good combination. So sit with it, start wrapping your own head around things, Start getting educated so that you can speak to it and find someone that you can talk to, whether it's a friend, a therapist that you can talk to openly and honestly about all of your thoughts and feelings around it. And eventually you will come into your own feeling of acceptance. You'll start to get clarity, and you will start going back into or moving back into the realm, I feel, of self-love and self-acceptance, because you do have to learn to love the new you, the you
Mm,
that you never knew and that you
mm,
neglected because you didn't know, right?
mm.
What do you think? Anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I agree. When you first said sit with it yourself, I was like, huh, why? And then as you explained it, I was like, no, that does make sense. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to sit with it yourself so you can kind of process what does that actually mean and look like for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then also understanding that when you're at a point where you do want to tell people, for some, for a little bit, it might feel, not for everybody, for some people, it might feel like this is such a huge to do about me just telling people that my brain is different, right? But it is what it is. When you do start telling people this, the reactions you will get will be varied. They
Mm-hmm.
will be everywhere from pure confusion to disbelief
Mm-hmm.
to trying to overcompensate for their own discomfort by trying to make you feel super comfortable. And you were not uncomfortable at all until they did that.
Exactly. Exactly.
And just kind of preparing yourself for those reactions and to not take them personal, like not to internalize them.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I've learned, I think, a lot over the last few years in particular is other people's feelings are not my fault, not my responsibility. So, not in a way of like, I don't care about people, but people's reactions to things are not something I can control.
Right.
People's immediate go to actions and things like that are not something I can control. So, to just kind of know that's the case,
Mm-hmm.
so that if you even get an answer that you're like, I don't like that answer, you can be like, but that ain't got nothing to do with me.
Yep.
And to kind of roll with it that way.
Yeah, I agree. And also to recognize that some people are going to be uncomfortable because they're really not, they don't know how to respond or react, or
Hmm.
why are you telling me this? And share it with whoever you want to share it with. You don't have to share it with everybody. Share it with whomever you want to share it with. But just know that it's not always bad, it's not always hard or anything
Hmm.
like that. The more you come to an acceptance of yourself in anything, the easier it becomes to be yourself in all situations and circumstances. That's just my
Hmm.
philosophy. All right.
I'm with you. Thanks for squirreling with us. Have questions? Want to share your experience or other feedback privately with us? You can email us at bgbgsquirrel@gmail.com. That's bgbgsquirrel@gmail.com.